you're definitely gonna hit this can of
Yeah.
banana OG that got me goofy. All right, hello world. It is I, he is I, not so slim with the not a tilted brim today. I am Ryan, aka Crownson's Corner from the Healing Chefs podcast. This is the Healing Chefs podcast. I'm not how you are. And today we have Scotty of TeaCo Biosupply. Ooh, that was a little loud. All right. Hey, brother, thank you for coming in. We're excited to have you here today. We'll go ahead and go over. So our first segment is cannabis journey. It's all about like how you found cannabis yourself, and then we'll kind of go like how you like where you're at transitioning into now.
Good call. Yeah.
Awesome.
I like the Sin City Seeds.
Yeah. We're going to go over all that stuff. So real quick with the Sin City Seeds. So if you like from the last episode, me and some people were going to end up growing. I named a strain for them, Nuclear Power, which is GMO times Blue Power. They had a contest 2 years ago, and the Valley named it. Shout out Arizona. We won that. So we're gonna bring that that strain and also the other one that I got from them, which is Atlantis. Forbidden Fruit times Blue Power. We're going to bring that to the Valley too. So,
all right,
be looking out for that. But this is all about you right now. Scotty, can you tell us a little bit about how you found cannabis? What did you start with, like flower, or and where and your journey from there?
it's a good question. I originally started cultivating cannabis in 2000. Let's say.
Okay.
I was a caregiver in Colorado, which was the first year we went medical.
Oh, okay.
Back then, you were allowed to caregive for up to 4 people.
Okay.
And you could do 24 plants. So at the time, we kind of stuck to the 99 count.
Okay.
Previously, just to keep it limited, my first sort of exposure to cannabis was as a kid, where I kind of grew up in an environment where a lot of people smoked cigarettes, adults meaning.
Yeah.
And my mom always made me clean ashtrays, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And
fun.
Yeah, for sure. And heavy smoking for sure in the 80s.
Yeah.
So in 84, and I can remember it pretty vividly, my parents used to have a New Year's Day party. And first time I really kind of figured out what was going on was when I smelled it. Because it smelled so much different than
the regular
than cigarettes. And then I noticed when people were consuming it, they were consuming it in a group or in like a circle.
This is interesting how a child sees this. Yeah.
For sure. And it was interesting because I just did not like the smell of cigarettes, even though it was always around me, and I never smoked, but it literally was just always around me. My parents were like pack a day each people.
Yeah, I had
Yep. And so the smell was what really caught me, because I thought the smell in general was not only different, but it was something that I actually kind of turned on to.
Yeah, it's funny how, like it's the same. Like like as a bud tender, I used to tell people, your body talks to you. You need to listen. Like when you smell things, and your body's like, "Hey, I like that." There's a reason, because your body may be deficient in something. Your body's talking to you like, "Hey, go get that shit." Yeah. Like when we're hungry and you smell something, what happens? You're like, "Ah." So yeah, exactly. I like it.
Olfactory.
Yes,
sense,
there you
basically.
Go. Smarter words than I used. I love it. Thank you for helping me. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. So that was kind of the first time I remember actually being exposed to it. And I grew up in an environment where it was a lot of hippie and a little bit Gilligan's Island.
Okay.
And Florida and South Florida in general was pretty loose then, especially in the 80s, if you will.
Because for a while they were pretty like horrible for years with weed.
Oh, well, that's loose, meaning the behavior. The consequences were incredibly strict.
Okay, I'm okay.
Yeah. So at the time I can remember there was a lot of it around.
Hmm.
But yes, the consequences of having it was extreme to say the least. And and I had my parents had some family members or some some people, friends of the family
Hmm.
who got locked up for quite a while, whether it was via plane or via boat, bringing it in.
Yeah.
Usually from like Colombia or Jamaica or something. My mom was a florist. My dad was a landscaper. We did a lot of nursery stuff. I kind of grew up growing plants, ornamental flowers, a lot of bromeliads, a lot of mums, a lot of poinsettias. So we were always around plants. So that kind of gave me a little bit, maybe more,
Insight into.
yeah, into the industry, but not necessarily the cannabis industry per se.
Okay.
My first exposure to actually seeing the plant was one of my parents' employees. And
Oh.
yeah, and he was a Cuban gentleman and super smart. And he immigrated in the kind of the Castro environment.
Okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
into South Florida. And it was cool because it was the nursery was in a fairly rural area.
Hmm.
And it was one of those things where you kind of set it back where nobody really went back by the drainage pond and all of the stuff where like all the spiders and snakes would be. Um, so I
Where
do
nobody travels.
nobody but him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, and
A gorilla growing in the
for
in the
sure.
shop.
Yeah, and for sure, and it was funny because it was typical along a drainage ditch where it was like it's not mine kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
just sort of in between,
it's
and
there.
yeah, and it was for his own personal experience because I remember he was a lifetime employee for my parents, and I just remember it being something that he really tapped into for his own personal use,
Okay.
versus being out there and trying to make it an enterprise.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We talked a little bit about that in the last episode. I mean, and again, it's good. It's good for whatever reason. Because sometimes that money helps do good things if you're about the money. But it is also great to know that there's those people that are in it just for the health benefits and the help that it brings to their lives.
yeah, I would call that, yeah, the value add.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
See, I
it,
mean, you're adding all this value to my podcast right now. You think I'd be
I
better with the words? You're killing it, Doc.
well,
Thank you.
you said you smoked a little weed. I'm like,
Oh man, they smoked a lot of weed with me,
did
and
they?
and I'm gonna make you hit this banana OG before you leave, just so like there's someone else in the world experiencing this shit. But no,
Yeah.
it's good stuff. It's strong stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, no, and I've heard nothing but good things about Alex and Cannaplanet, and he really fits into our model,
yeah. Okay.
which we really kind of look at the soil as the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So our focus there is on the soil, which is a really kind of where TeaCo evolved,
Okay.
which the sort of the way that cannabis evolved was through the hydro store. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that, but
Yes.
that was really where it started.
Mm-hmm.
So in 98, I moved from the Valley, which I lived here for 3 years, 95 to 98.
Okay.
And at the time in 96, California had legalized medical.
Okay.
And so I got some exposure to that. And I had exposure to cannabis, but this was a little bit more open source. It
Okay.
wasn't completely legal, but it was a little bit more. You had a little bit more space to maneuver.
Absolutely. For the majority of my life, I've been in we'll call it the clandestine. Yeah.
Yeah, I call it the free market.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
like that better.
yeah. I don't know if
I'm
people are
not
like
a.
it's the
I'm not
black
a.
market. I'm
I'm not
like
like.
it's the free market.
I'm not a. I'm not a secret agent.
No,
but
uh,
I do. I mean, it is kind of clandestine to be honest. But
at the time it had to be. So coming back to the hydro
yeah.
store, so I owned a chain of hydroponic supply stores in Colorado.
Okay.
I had 3 brick and mortars. So that was really the area in which people got the picks and shovels.
Mm-hmm.
And what really happened is it was it was a place where you could get information, but not a lot of information. And as we
Yeah.
got closer and closer to 2009, which is when we went like more legal, Obama was elected. The Cole memo came out. Uh, it gave us a little bit more space to where we could go brick and mortar versus like Backpack Brigade.
Okay.
So 2000 to 2009 was was small batch caregiving, people going into the hydro stores, we're growing tomatoes, if you will,
No, I
not
def
actually engaging in, hey, how do I grow this? How do I set up a
because you can't.
right? And I'm talking about like anything from like how do you set up a light fixture to an inline fan to
Hmm.
any kind of exchange, because at the time most of the cannabis was being grown indoor
For
under
sure.
lights in a fairly compact environment. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Because I'm partially from Missouri, like I said, and like we at one point in time, like I had a catalog to a hydro store, and I was planning it out and everything, and I was even going to Home Depot, and looking at all the ducting and all the different things that I could get from there, because you had to get like different parts from different places, because if you put it all together and showed like it was basically easy for them, and like you could even go pick up all your stuff at the hydro store and
yeah,
get to the counter, and as soon as you leave they call, and because one, they're going to call on you at that point in time, because they don't want to get in trouble themselves,
yeah,
so.
yeah. And
But
one of my colleagues opened up the first hydro farm and sunlight account in Florida.
oh,
And he's a family friend, and the store was notoriously being watched by
yeah.
local police, if you will, and you would even have a lot of out of towners, people who would come from like Tampa and Orlando and Miami, where they would come in. But yeah, those were the days for the most part that you didn't ask questions.
Yep.
You always paid in cash and you paid full price,
Yep. Yep.
and for the most part you were there to kind of get in and get out. It wasn't really a place to share information or knowledge.
That's sad.
And that was just the sign of the times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from an evolutionary standpoint, you can see the progression where now we're not only talking about it, but we can consume it.
Hmm.
Obviously there's a ton of information out there that allows people to learn and access to be better growers. Obviously, you can grow indoors or outdoors. To me, it's more of like an evolution of the industry itself. So I look at pre 2000, and then from 2000, 2009. And then when Obama got elected and the Cole memo came out, what that did in Colorado is it allowed us, the caregiver, to actually access the brick and mortar.
Yeah. Okay.
Versus before, it was a little bit more like backpack brigade and trapping and
Yeah.
it,
Kind of like that Amsterdam. Like you can have it here, but you can't bring it here. Like, there's just some weird laws and stuff that's not set up for success.
there was a lot of different models, and
Hmm.
depending on where you were at, it really was almost like a get in and get out play.
Okay.
And most of the time it was usually like you were engaging, especially on the grower side, which is what I was a little bit more on the side. It was like, hey, today's price is not tomorrow's price. um,
Hmm.
so there was a lot of that going on. And then most of the time you were doing business with people who were probably like connecting with that end user client.
Okay.
So they had a broad group of people, whether it was like through hotels, restaurants. They were really the people who were tapping into the end customer, if you will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Obviously you can call it a plug if you want, which would be the term that
Yeah.
these guys would use. But so in 2009,
Well, if you're cold and always plugged in, what are you? You're a refrigerator, dog. I mean, you're plugged in.
it,
It
it
happens.
makes sense.
It makes sense.
Right, right. And so in that case, the once again, the industry was legal in Colorado. So we
Mm.
had that medical environment. And it was peer to peer. So after 2009, when that Cole memo came out, and Obama was just like, hey, we're not going to send in federal attorney generals to come into your store if you're opening up a brick and mortar.
Hmm.
It actually allowed the grower and the caregiver network to walk into the brick and mortar, which was really nice.
Yeah.
And it allowed the brick and mortar person to not only license up, but it allowed them to actually have an exchange at that point of sale.
I like that. What do you maybe we'll get into it a little bit later, but the whole scheduling thing is another thing that's gonna.
The Schedule 3.
Yeah.
Um,
because
My
they're packaging it. I don't know if you've seen it. They're packaging it as a way for people to be able to access banking and stuff like that. But I feel like it's going to cause more problems. I think they're like I think they're spinning it.
you know, I think there's a lot of different interests involved.
Okay.
And I think even coming back to the comment and the topic is in Colorado, we went adult use in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And between 2009 and 2012, brick and mortar to adult use,
Mm-hmm.
um, the participants changed a lot with regard to both the regulation and the ownership. So what you saw is in 2009 you saw a lot of people who were out of work.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and I can tell you there was a lot of industrial space for rent at very cheap prices. So you saw developers, small business people, attorneys, accountants, real estate people. Those people actually came into the business between 2009 and 2012, and most of those people had never been in the business pre 2009.
Just because they had a lower in with like the spaces and stuff like that. Do you think it was just because of that?
It was
It's just
really
like a money,
it
just
was
a
the
money.
risk,
There's low risk.
lower risk.
Yeah. Yeah. My bad.
Yeah, so you had a lot of people out of work,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you had an industry that gave a little bit of access and a little bit of license, sure, and which made the risk palatable.
Okay.
And then more importantly is a lot of them started moving into that space and filling that void. And coming back to your comment with Schedule 3, after 2012, we saw a lot of the associations and the legal people come in.
Yeah.
And I won't go too far into it, but I was actually an original donor or investor into some of those sort of associations, MIG, Marijuana Industry Group, which
Okay.
was basically created by two lawyers, um, people who were writing or helping write legislation.
Yeah. I
Of
mean,
on
we got a
the
big one out here right now.
it, so once people who are in law and regulation get involved, which coming back to this Schedule 3 thing, things get a little bit
Weird.
yeah, they get a little convoluted because there's
Yes.
a lot of different interests. So that's something I really kind of I like to throw around at people like this, people with um, really expensive degrees, MBAs and law degrees, where it's like, if I just told you that there's a product out there that's super low risk, completely non-toxic, you can't actually die from it, and it provides a ton of value, and it's in a lot of demand. What would you do? And most of them would usually drive towards that. We'll let the free market decide. Less government regulation,
Mm-hmm.
um, less intervention in small business.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Right.
Yeah, we're a small business. Don't look at who owns us.
So Schedule 3, I see it as I see a combination as a special interest play.
Mm-hmm.
So those who are creating and making and writing the laws are being influenced by those who get benefited the most and have the ability to pay for that representation. And I think it's a real wake up call for cannabis, because I think there's a lot of people in cannabis who think they have or had that access. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden there was a fish or a shark that was a lot bigger than them. And that's really where I think a lot of people are looking at it from the old school environment
Mm-hmm.
versus perhaps the the new groups of people who want to, and I can tell you who they are. They're big tobacco.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They've
They're
they've
big.
been holding they've been holding land forever
They're
for it.
big pharma,
Yeah. They don't want you to heal. Yeah.
big food,
Mm-hmm.
and big alcohol. So when you look at that,
FDA's a lie.
well, it's captured, right? And the idea is it's like, hey, we're not picking on you guys. We're just basically presenting the facts.
Well, I mean, the FDA and the all that, the DEA and all that stuff they're all like slush funds. So basically, I don't. I'm serious. I'm a veteran, and
Uh,
I'll talk.
yeah,
They're literally all slush funds for them because I don't know if you guys know this, but politicians can make money off of patents.
of course.
Okay. So what they do is they talk to their buddies and then they push a patent through or whatever the money that they got and say and package it as healthy or good for the American people and whatnot and so forth. But all they are cashing in. That's why you have some politicians with so much damn money. Like and they're just paying each other and stuff like that. That's the biggest problem we have going on right now, I think.
Well,
Well, I mean, there's so many problems.
and right. So that being said, is coming back to those problems. The way that I really describe the cannabis plant
Yeah.
and the market is very, very low risk.
Mm,
And that's something
makes sense.
I don't think the cannabis community really promotes that quite as much as they should, because there's a lot of value in that. Being a low risk substance, being a low risk, wherever you look at it in the industry compared to what is already there, whether it's a Tylenol or a bottle of vodka, at the end of the day, we have the data.
Shoot, chocolate,
Sugar,
sugar.
yeah, corn fructose.
Yeah,
So the idea is that we probably should be in this, I do say this a lot, is we should be looking for equal treatment, not special treatment.
I
Because
like that.
yeah, because special treatment actually puts you in that category 3 or that schedule 3, and equal treatment would actually put you in avocados and tomatoes and bananas. Because
Free market again.
you got it. So there's a few different things going on there, because and this is what I've personally seen, um, when it comes to that incentive structure, because there's different groups with different incentives.
Correct.
Um, and I think that's a very scary place for people at the top, because they're not used to perhaps the diversity of, or the value add of the feedstock, which
Mm,
I think this is really where you get into the nuts and bolts of cannabis as a whole. Because most people, or a lot of people, the focus is on even just like consuming it a certain way, whether it's smoking it or getting buzzed on it, but it's not very monolithic. It's actually incredibly dynamic.
exactly.
So that sort of dynamic nature of it makes it incredibly competitive and very low risk. So coming back to TeaCo, the way we try to sort of describe this and utilize cannabis as like a catalyst to get people talking about soil,
There you go.
because soil is the platform.
I mean, where you got to start? Where do you start?
95% of the
Ground up.
That's right. 95% of the things we eat and consume are directly affiliated or correlated to the soil. So, how we treat the soil actually is a representation or a foundation of how we treat ourselves, how we treat the environment, how we treat each other. So, that is where I really see a lot of opportunity
Yeah.
and a lot of demand. Because if we can get more people talking about soil, it integrates very well into things that actually we use every day. Um, food, drink,
Yeah.
animal protein, vegetable protein,
Absolutely.
pretty much everything. So that is one thing that cannabis really does, is it drives the demand and the incentive for people to want to talk about soil.
Yeah. That and I'm glad that it does that. And I'm with what you guys offer is healthier stuff, and people don't even notice that a lot of the things that even that they're eating outside of like fast food, just because you're lazy or something like that, you don't understand like how many chemicals outside of whatever it was already grown in. It's got 19 more chemicals in it and stuff like that. I think it's great that a lot of us, like TeaCo, obviously leading the way, different grows like Canna Planet,
He's doing it.
uh,
Yeah.
and stuff. It's all about the true quality and the true actually nature of who's actually trying to help you guys, um and wanting the best for you, because growing all everything through salts, adding salts and everything like that, and not growing it naturally is only going to get you like certain way in life.
Yeah. Well, and full disclosure, I grew up using, my parents used a ton of chemicals
Right.
and
I
a
mean,
ton of horrible things, but at the end of the day, those things are cyclical. So what you just described, whether it was the food that's making us unhealthy or the chemicals that we put on it, at the end of the day, that correlates to risk.
okay.
So that risk profile we are actually increasing, which is a bad model for capitalism. Capitalism is really driven for the demand, but the lowering of risk. So when you're talking to a farmer about soil and about yield, because farmers are the original bankers,
Hmm.
their incentive is yield.
Yes.
So that is where they're driven, and I totally respect farmers as a farmer, and I totally respect that incentive. The question is how do you get there? And then more importantly, do you get rewards or incentives for lowering the risk via the consumer or the demand? So I think that's where people like Alex at Canna Planet are coming into.
I get it now. I get it. It just all like clicked. It just you're just lowering the risk of what you're intaking and stuff, and hopefully changing the outcome of the equation that is life.
Uh,
Um,
so I like when you said hopefully, because we actually have data, proven data, that the consumers are driving that way. And that's the most important part is if it's a consumer driven event, it's way better than if it's a government sponsored enterprise. So that's really what we're trying to communicate to the lawmakers and the people up above, which is first and foremost, there are people who are looking for this, the
yes,
demand side. In
yeah,
fact, I can give you a great example where this living soil component is really more or less a marketing campaign for those of us who believe in the model. Okay.
yep.
The more we can educate the consumer on that model, the more interested the consumer is understanding that model. Right.
Same in like a bud tender situation when you're explaining. I'm just speaking from my own experience when you're explaining the difference between resin and rosin.
So education is a big, and point of sale is a big component. So I do make fun of, myself as well as others just as much, because we're all kind of, different in our own incentive and our own motivation.
Yeah,
And I understand why people use salts. I sold a lot of salts. I sold a lot of fertilizer. And most of the time, the reason why they use those things is because they want bigger yields. But they don't have customers coming in and saying, "Hey, I want that stuff grown in Rockwell that you got." Or I want that stuff that's grown with X brand in cocoa on a drip indoors. They don't have customers who are doing that, versus
no.
we do have customers. Alex and other people have customers like, you know what I want? I want that living soil
And
vibe.
it's just an evolution of the actual like growth of cannabis in this in the United States. It's really gone like they held the education down for a long time, and and it's been through my journey. Like I tried flower, and then I got here and like into Arizona, and I tried shatter, and I tried crumble, and then I tried live resin, and the more I learned, I'm like, oh, solvents, not so great. Not saying that there isn't good live resin out there and stuff like that. Don't come at me.
It's
There's
a
a price
choice.
there's a price point and there's choices for everybody. I'll still smoke some live resin here and there, but for the most part in my life, as a lot of people are looking for healthier options to things, lower risk to our lives,
That's right.
to our health and whatnot. Um, like the rosin and the organic is the way to go. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And you can also see, because cannabis is incredibly dynamic, it's not monolithic. So it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. And I think a lot of people try to peg that, which from my standpoint, you really try to broaden the brush, where it's like, hey, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but the majority of people consume things not by inhaling them.
yeah,
They actually consume them by drinking and eating them.
yeah. It's
So
because it's easier and not as abrasive to do.
less risky.
Yeah,
Right. And so the way that I see it, and I don't think Colorado really gets enough credit just because it doesn't really look for it, but they're the pioneer of that, because they had the most access and the most space, like, to garner that sort of that process.
yeah.
So
That growth. Yeah.
that's right. And so cannabis markets actually mature and they evolve very quickly.
Hmm.
And I can tell you just from my own experience owning hydro stores is, I remember when everybody. Or I don't say every, I shouldn't say everybody, but I remember when a bunch of people started coming into my shop, going from like Bubble Man hash bags to master cases of, N butane.
Yeah.
Right. So and that
And then to go back
ex- and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly what happened in
cyclical.
In
It's,
Colorado, because everybody was like, "Oh, this is the new." And I can, even remember like Best Value Vax, Pure Pressure, like all of these new pieces of equipment, all of these
Yeah, do you
new,
remember like Davvax?
for sure,
Like it was
CO2
where it was
extraction.
like, or Davvax was this thing that you had like this bowl that didn't have a hole in it, but you had this tube that came off too, and then you heated that little glass straw up, and you would be hitting your piece, and then you put the straw in there, and then the vapor actually goes through the straw and through everything and through there. Is like there's so many different things that have come through.
Right. And then you have like something like the volcano,
Yeah, volcano.
which is one of my favorite ways to consume it, and it's raw flour, and we were using the volcano in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
So that's kind of the thing is that me, you, the consumers, we evolve, we change, our
yeah.
tastes change, but the idea is if we can manage and gain access and recognize that, that the risk profile is
Mm-hmm.
fairly low compared to all of the other things we consume, it's really giving us, the cannabis community, an advantage. And I would suggest most people, even if they don't actually consume cannabis, that's something they can get behind.
Yeah, and I think it brings a lot more attention to the other things that you got going on in life too.
So there,
So you
it's
start looking at
integrating.
the risk of everything.
The food is where we get most of our risk, and I would suggest even the sugar. So these are
Yes.
two things where we can actually, via the data, show and demonstrate that these two things are actually more risky and more dangerous to humans than something like cannabis would be.
And you have like, but you also have stuff that they're pushing a lot nowadays, which is weird, and I'm have a problem with it myself. Is this one, the energy drinks, but the sugar free stuff. I just saw recently that they have sugar free like Reese's coming out, and or I mean they're already out, and that's aspartame again.
Yeah.
Aspartame's horrible for you. I know. My grandparents were diabetic,
Yeah.
so that's all I want to drink
Yeah.
because everything else tastes like syrup to me. But it's all poison. But yeah, I got
Well,
to get off of all of it.
you can see it's coming from the manufacturer of the mill, not necessarily the ground.
Yeah, no, this is all manufactured stuff that I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that perhaps our generation,
just
and certainly people who are younger, are starting to be more aware of, meaning what they put in their bodies, whether it's food, sugar, or cannabis. And what I try to communicate with TeaCo is that it all starts at the soil level. So if we actually recognize the value of the soil, which is why we call it the platform, how we actually treat that platform is going to determine the supply chain or the end product of these things. And the real point I try to emphasize is that that is where the growth is happening in the market.
mm,
So coming back to TeaCo is it's like, hey, what are you really espousing here? It's like we're espousing a model, not even a brand. Like the
okay.
brand, we really try to like encourage people to participate in the model, because the model itself provides a ton of value, and the incentive is usually driven by the consumer. And I think that's, you look at Alex and it's like, hey, he's doing that because he's listening to his customers saying that that's what we're looking for.
How do you run a restaurant? Chef has to listen to the negative as well as the positive,
That's right. And more importantly,
especially more the negative. To be honest,
if they want to evolve,
yeah,
yeah, and get better, because that's kind of how you learn, and that's even the learning curve. So when we emphasize soil is the platform, and we emphasize risk, and we emphasize demand and value, it starts to resonate with people who aren't just out there taking bong rips or smoking weed. You actually start to get a lot of business people who recognize, wow, you guys might have something with this. So that position is incredibly valuable and instrumental for the future, which I think the government is going to do sort of the best it can to try to sort of muck up or cloudy up the water. But I
yeah.
think the community as a whole, the more simple it is, and the consumer is uh, sort of the indicator, the forward indicator. It's like, yeah, these consumers, and you can see that everywhere.
Basically, like the educator of yeah,
The driver.
yeah,
And you can see consumers in general are what is their incentive? It's like their incentive for younger people is actually the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So people are like, well, what does TeaCo do for the environment?
Environment and their health. As much as us who grew up in the 80s and 90s were about loud like colors and different flavors and
Yeah,
like that, and then
extreme.
extreme stuff, and then we get to nowadays and they're like, hey, let's not extreme it at, like, can we get a little like health?
Right. And
Yeah.
extreme, we were pitched that in the 80s and 90s, but not recognizing the risks that come with it.
Oh yeah, no,
Eh,
yeah, that's what we're all learning and changing now. Like
so
the
you're
whole
like, oh, yeah.
surge. I'm like, I love that. I don't know why, but I love, like, that was that Talladega Nights, anarchy, anarchy. I
Ricky
don't know what
Bobby.
it is, but I love it. That was us in the 80s and 90s.
It is. So you can see, the I like to say, bacon is actually pork belly. Just ask the person who knows what a pork belly is
Yeah,
versus a piece of bacon. Bacon drives people to want to eat. Pork bellies drive people to not. So it's really a marketing thing.
I love that.
Because
It really
as
is. It's
yeah,
just how you is really how you package everything. Real quick though, we're gonna jump into the segment, and then we're gonna have to jump real quick into our break. But the next segment is Trip Tales. I don't know if you've All right. So, our second segment is, we went a little long on the first one, but I love it. It's all good stuff, and that's really what we were here for. But Trip Tales is all about psychedelic experience. And well, I mean, with that, we also have, with the Colorado kind of leading the way with, like, what, do they decriminalize at least, or
both.
both?
Yeah.
Do you have any experience with psychedelics, or have any questions? Because I have a lot of experience.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And yeah, in Colorado, we decriminalized in Denver, and then we have a legalized market for cultivation. As a person who grew up in Florida in the rural areas, I know what a cow patty is.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and that being said, I think, with all things natural, I
Mm-hmm.
still am a believer that that market is coming back, and the reason why is because people are looking for certain whether it's responses or certain effects, but at the end of the day, it really is coming from a naturally derived substance.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about risk. Um, and I love that, and I'm glad that everyone is kind of looking towards that mental health and that and bodily health lately. And we'll get into more of this stuff about TeaCo with the plug talk at the end, but we're just going to jump into our break real quick, and then we'll come back with mental health as well, and finish out the rest of it.
Right. these things, and it's like because the delivery mechanism and the process is very simple and primitive, which encourages the incentive for people to buy it. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's like they don't need a piece, they don't need a rig, they don't need a
And it's
whatever.
and we're gonna jump into the plug talks here real quick, but it's just like a feeling though when you're in a dispo or something. I've been there before where you're like kind of enchanted a little bit when you're in the dispo and you see these things and like people are like 7 pre-rolls for $10 and they just go crazy and buy them and stuff, and then they get home and they realize they were just kind of excited about the whole like delivery mechanism and stuff that they didn't have to do, but then they're like, man, I wish I kind of would have done it myself.
That's right. That's
But,
right. Well,
and that's something that drives the market.
it does. And it's price is what you pay, value is what you get. So
And people don't understand that. People want like the Walmart of weed nowadays, and like one of the things that hurt my heart, and to each their own, but when I was a bud tender, that kind of hurt my heart is when they would come in and ask, I just want the highest THC. Like, okay, have you ever walked into a bar and gone, hey, bartender, I don't care what it tastes like or whatever.
give me the Everclear.
Give me the fucking Everclear.
Yeah,
can I have Everclear? Can I have Everclear straight?
On ice?
No one ever did that. So,
right.
Like,
so that's a learning curve.
Education. Try to educate yourselves. If you just still want the high THC and that's you, I still love you. Do your thing, but maybe try something else.
You don't really see that as much in the data in a place like Colorado. And I still think, for a market to really season out, it usually takes 3 to 5 years. In Arizona, we're not really there yet.
No, I mean, we're still a fledgling compared to Colorado, definitely California. So, I mean, the consumer has some time to educate themselves, so we don't need to be mad at them. But if there's someone out there, maybe help them out.
And it'll become more highly specialized, if you will.
Absolutely.
When coming back to the whole TeaCo concept is driving that living soil narrative is something we like to espouse for our customers, because we feel like that's where the consumer driven people, especially the people who might have a higher quality of taste, who might not be so like budget sensitive. And I think there are certain people who really kind of tap into that demand.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe the consumption lounge, because I'm familiar with the New Mexico market, you can see the consumption lounge is a great place for people to learn what they're looking for.
Right. Like the High Lounge does a great job at that. Real quick though, let's go ahead and play that plug talk and we'll get into more of the business and close it all out.
Yeah.
Bro, there's an image on it, so when you have a chance, go on the YouTube and watch it. It'll be on the live tab. I'll try to put it on the other one, but it'll probably just stay on the live tab. But I have little like 10-second clips that actually show there's like a plug and everything, electricity.
Tuning fork.
It's actually like a
electricity plug.
Yeah.
Conductor.
Yeah, because we're all having fun, man.
Plugged in.
But can you explain to the watchers, listeners, real quick, exactly what TeaCo supplies, bio supplies, if they're looking, especially those that are looking for organic growing and like nutrients and stuff. Obviously, if you know what teas are.
And you can see more people are looking for that stuff. In layman's terms, we're beneficial organisms for the soil, or a probiotic.
Probiotics.
Yeah,
we were talking about that in the last thing.
Exactly. And probiotics people can digest and recognize because they're talking about their health and their gut, and technically that all starts from the soil. So if we look at it as just like a probiotic for our gut, that probiotic is for the soil, which encourages uptake. And uptake, whether it's in our gut or in the soil, encourages the ability to break down and absorb nutrients and minerals at a much faster pace, which actually makes us much healthier or grow much faster.
Nice. And you did give me this bag of dope. No, I'm just kidding. It's a dope bag, though.
Thank you.
Literally, it says dope.
Yeah, shout out to Lori Bubakir for that, my marketing lady.
We got some herbs and stuff that if you guys maybe get some meal prep from me, I'm going to be using in there. We had some rosemary. What else do we have here?
Rosemary, mint, oregano, and basil, and that's a globe basil. You open it up, it'll pop. It'll get that terpene going.
I can already. This shit's smelling through the. Oh. Hey, There's a Ricola.
We like to call that the dank.
Oh my God. I just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
want to
right.
live in there.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing is it, whether it's food or cannabis, it all comes from the soil. So
Shit smells so good.
thank you.
I kind of want to smoke it.
Yeah, yeah, infuse it,
Yeah,
right?
no, yeah.
No, and that's kind of the whole point is that we try to make it not only fun, but really for the customer, for our customers, we try to explain ourselves as a tool,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
and with a tech. So it's like, hey, the tool and the tech are based on science. If you can deploy them into your model, whether it's a food growing model, a cannabis growing model, any kind of plant where soil is the platform, you're going to end up getting a much better result, which is encouraging to farmers and people who grow things because we want them to be successful.
Absolutely. So if you guys are trying to grow organically or whatnot, you guys deal with like small grows to big grows, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Whatever.
Individuals to
All
as big as it
comers.
gets.
All
Yeah.
comers. Please tap into. Can you tell them your Instagram? The
Website is tecobiosupply.com. Instagram, we're on, it's We Feed the Soil.
yeah.
And then we also have a TeaCo Biosupply. And then, we do have about a half a dozen, maybe a little bit more on the retail side in the Valley. Both cannabis centric stores like Arizona Moonlight Grow,
Okay.
Little Shop of Hydros, Witches Gardens. Then we also are in like Dig It, Phoenix, the Plant Bodega. So once again, as we're trying to sort of communicate to people, it's like, hey, we want you growing more plants.
Yeah.
Because if you grow more plants and you use the tool and the tech, you're going to be really successful at it, which will encourage you to talk about soil or plants more, whether it's cannabis or food or anything else.
You're basically educating the consumer.
It is an educational platform. Our brand is obviously represented individually, but we are trying to encourage people to participate in the model.
And that's what I'm telling everybody with the podcast here, because we're all about mental health and helping people and getting everybody's creative voice out and whatnot. And it's all about community and working together. And word of mouth is probably the best way for education in a community to happen, because someone has to experience it. Like I say to a lot of people with mental health issues that I've been through, like, I'm here to help you. Like, someone has to put their hand on the fire or the stove to know that it's hot, to be able to tell you. So we appreciate you guys for all the years of like, and we're going to definitely have you back, because there's so much stuff to unpack that you were telling me and stuff. Like, I wanted to keep going into it. But you have a lot of knowledge, and I want to tap into that here coming up. And like I said, we're going to be growing, I think, probably using some of your stuff and whatnot, and we'll be showing you guys that eventually. Can't tell you all the things about it, but just go over some of the things that I have or the podcast has coming up. Like I said, next week is Gas Pump Farms, and hopefully Tree Junkie, T Will from them.
Yep.
And other than that, I'm going to get some more clips out and smoke some more weed. But this has been awesome, man. I appreciate you coming out. And like I said, we'll have you back again. Remember, be good, be clean, be safe. Well, as always, be safe, and tap in, smoke up, trip out. Deuces.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Ryan.
Yeah. It's probably me.
Oh, so funny. I was saying Nathan this morning. I was out at Project Roots, and I was out at Project Roots. I'm like, you want to see the most complicated tech on the farm? I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna see myself.
No battery. No button.
What was you at LA?
Yeah, I was.
We got some more cards, man. Finally.
All right, let's take this picture.
It was definitely, yeah, it had that slap.
Yeah, no, I put a little action in there, so they're just like on the YouTube and stuff. It looks like I'm having fun. We're having fun.
I'm glad to be a part of it. I appreciate the
Absolutely, I appreciate you too.
Yeah,
But yeah, no,
thanks,
we're
we
gonna
wanna
be
support the
growing.
cause.
We're gonna be growing with the. Matter of fact, speaking of which, support the cause. How about that? Take that.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate you supporting.
Yeah, no
supporting
problem.
me.
I was gonna say, your first bag when you go plant, or even if you want to just let me know.
Yeah, I got my boy.